Have you ever noticed how your mind can take a single moment and replay it over and over again, long after it's already passed? A short conversation, a small mistake, a simple interaction, and somehow, hours later, you're still thinking about it. Not just remembering it, but analyzing it, replaying it, questioning it. You go over what you said, what they might have meant, what you should have said instead. And the more you think about it, the more possibilities appear. It doesn't feel like you're choosing to do this. It feels like your mind is doing it on its own. And even when you try to stop, it keeps going. This experience is often called overthinking, but the word itself doesn't explain why it happens or why it's so difficult to control. Because from the inside, overthinking does not feel like a bad habit. It feels like problem solving. It feels like preparation. It feels like trying to understand something more clearly. Your mind is not trying to create stress. It is trying to reduce uncertainty. One of the main reasons overthinking happens is the brain's need for closure. When something feels incomplete or unclear, your mind keeps returning to it, trying to resolve it. This is especially true for social situations, where meaning is not always explicit. A simple message can be interpreted in multiple ways. A tone of voice can carry different meanings. Because the information is incomplete, your brain fills in the gaps by generating possibilities. The problem is that these possibilities are not limited. Each new interpretation creates another question, and each question creates another layer of thought. Over time, this process becomes self-sustaining. Another important factor is perceived consequence. The more important something feels, the more attention your mind gives it. If you believe that a situation could affect how others see you, your future opportunities, or your relationships, your brain treats it as something that needs to be analyzed carefully. This increases the intensity of thought. What might have been a small moment becomes something your mind revisits repeatedly. Not because it is actually that significant, but because it feels significant. Emotional sensitivity also plays a role. When you are more aware of emotional signals, you notice subtle changes in tone, expression, and behavior. This awareness can be useful, but it also creates more data to process. Instead of experiencing interactions at a surface level, you experience them in detail. Each detail becomes something to interpret. Over time, this increases the complexity of your internal processing. What others move past quickly, you continue examining. There is also the influence of control. Thinking gives the illusion of control. When something is uncertain, analyzing it makes it feel more manageable. Even if no solution is found, the act of thinking creates the sense that you are doing something about it. This is why overthinking can feel difficult to stop. It is not just a pattern. It is a strategy your mind uses to cope with uncertainty. However, this strategy has limit. When thinking no longer leads to clarity, it begins to create repetition. The same thoughts cycle without resolution. And instead of reducing uncertainty, they amplify it. Another subtle factor is identity. Some individuals begin to associate overthinking with being careful, thoughtful, or aware. They may see it as part of how they process the world. While this perception can make overthinking feel justified, it also makes it harder to question. If overthinking is seen as necessary, stopping it may feel like losing something important. Over time, this reinforces the pattern. The mind continues to engage in the same process, even when it no longer provides useful insight. As you begin to understand overthinking more clearly, the experience itself starts to change. Not because the thoughts immediately disappear, but because your relationship with them becomes different. One of the most important shifts is recognizing that not every thought requires analysis. Thoughts appear automatically, but engagement is a separate process. When you begin noticing this distinction, you create a small space between thinking and reacting. In that space, you have a choice. You can continue the analysis, or you can allow the thought to pass without expanding it. Another important change involves how you interpret uncertainty. Instead of viewing uncertainty as something that must be resolved immediately, you begin allowing it to exist without forcing an answer. This reduces the urgency that drives overthinking. When the mind no longer feels pressured to solve everything, the intensity of thought decreases. Over time, this creates a more stable internal state. Attention also plays a key role. Overthinking thrives on sustained attention. The more attention you give a thought, the more it expands. By shifting attention to external activities, sensory input, or physical movement, you reduce the resources available for repetitive thinking. This does not eliminate thoughts completely, but it changes their influence. They become background rather than the center of your experience. Another transformation involves how you relate to outcomes. Overthinking often assumes that more thinking leads to better results. But in many cases, the opposite is true. Excessive analysis can delay action, increase doubt, and reduce clarity. When you begin recognizing this pattern, you start valuing action over analysis in certain situations. This does not mean acting without thinking, but it means recognizing when thinking has reached its useful limit. Emotional regulation also becomes more refined. Instead of responding to every thought with equal intensity, you begin differentiating between what is relevant and what is not. This reduces the emotional impact of repetitive thinking. Thoughts may still appear, but they carry less weight. Over time, this creates a sense of stability that was previously missing. Another important realization is that overthinking is not something you eliminate completely. It is something you manage. The goal is not to stop thinking, but to prevent thinking from becoming repetitive and unproductive. This shift in perspective changes the approach. Instead of trying to force your mind into silence, you learn to guide it more intentionally. Ultimately, overthinking is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that your mind is trying to process uncertainty, protect you from mistakes, and understand complex situations. The challenge is not the presence of thought, but the pattern it follows. When you understand that pattern, you gain the ability to change how it develops. And as that change happens, thinking becomes something that supports clarity rather than something that creates confusion.